In the absence of the village president, who's on vacation, I will take nominations for chairman pro temp this time.
I'll nominate John Williams.
Second.
There's been a motion and a second to nominate John Williams. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
You can say no, John.
Not really, because you can just all vote.
Yeah.
Exactly. We're all done? Okay.
You're in charge.
All right. Pledge allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Item 4, public appearances, public's opportunity to speak on any subject not on the agenda.
I have Paula Severson.
Oh, okay. You're not worn out sleeping in today?
Yeah, I'd like to. I figured since I was here, I would take this opportunity. I really want to thank the village board, the village police department, Public Works, Deer Grove EMS, everybody for all of the support for Festival this weekend. It was outstanding. Many of you, actually 5 of you, helped out at the Hot to Trot race on Saturday morning. Huge success. Couldn't have done it without the volunteers for that. We had record numbers for that. But it really takes, you know, quote unquote, a village to put on a major community event like this. And so I really wanted to thank all of you, our police. You know, they were working all weekend. JJ did a great job. We can't thank you enough. And if the fire department were here, I know they would say the same. They're out sandbagging right now tonight. So I just wanted to say thank you very much.
Thank you for a great event.
Yes.
You did a great job.
Yep.
Thanks, Paula. Item 5 is discuss and consider the minutes of the regular board meeting from June 4th. Any corrections, additions?
There was 2 typos that I saw that I gave to Deb.
Okay.
On the second page, under one was under law enforcement. It said giving, and I think it's supposed to be given. And then a couple paragraphs down, there was another word.
Under Parks and Rec.
Parks and Rec, something was like
It
added.
should be will instead of with.
Yeah. That was all I noticed.
Thanks.
I move to approve with the corrections.
Second.
Okay, we have a first and 2 seconds. That will determine the tiebreaker there. Is there any further discussion? Having heard none, then we'll move on. All those in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Anybody abstain? Motion carries. Item 6, we have a presentation by the UW Extension on Cottage Grove brand book.
How are you all today?
We're good.
Good, good. Sounds like you had a great festival weekend, despite the heat. And Paula, could I ask you to share that story? Are you, or
Sure.
to get choked up? Okay.
I am going to get
story.
choked up, I'm just going to tell you. So during the Hot to Trot race on Saturday morning, this was the first time we did a half marathon. And we decided we'd start at 7, close the course at 10:30. And at about 20 after 10, I was watching the computer and realized we still had 2 runners out on the course. And got a message from the Cottage Grove resident who is the bike trail behind the runners, who said, there's a woman out here, she's in her upper 50s, she's going pretty slow, she really wants to finish this race, it's on her bucket list. Is there any way you could keep the course open? And I said, give me a minute. And I was thinking, and half my volunteers were gone, and John, you were on an aid station out there, and I'm like, oh boy, this is a long time for them. And the bike person texted me again and said, look, I'll stay with her. There's an SUV trailing her. Well, you know, if you keep it open, we'll get her there. And I was like, okay, let her go. And so at about 10 to 11, this woman and her daughter come running down Clark Street. Most of the volunteers are gone at the Hot to Trot. I see not only the bike trail, but the bike lead, who went through the half marathon course the second time with her, and an SUV behind her. And they actually pull up and they come up to the race chute and get out and start clapping for her as if she had her own crowd there. And she crossed the finish line, and I put the medal around her neck, and she started crying. And she said, "I cannot believe that you guys just did this for me." And of course I started crying, then we were all crying. But it was pretty outstanding. And she said, "This, you know, I just can't believe you guys would do this." And that the former village board member, you know, drove, you know, whatever it was, 5 miles an hour for, you know, a good hour following her. But it really speaks to who Cottage Grove is. And I think as Kristen goes through this presentation, you're going to see why we came up with the brand we came up with. So.
And that is, and thank you for sharing that, that's the heart of what we've articulated as the Cottage Grove brand. You've all had a copy, from what I understand, or advanced look at the brand book, which is in one of its semi-final draft states. There's some changes that have probably been made since the PDF that you've seen. You know, a year ago I was here, a little over a year ago, presenting the results of the survey that we did of Cottage Grove residents, and we reviewed that as a committee and began talking over the course of the fall and the early winter about what does this mean to be a community in Cottage Grove. And the thing that kept coming up again and again and again is that it's the people, it's the neighbors, it's the, and I scratched my head for a long time over that, because every community I work with has people. People are, you know, once this idea is very concrete, we can count the residents, we can identify their demographics, how many men, how many women, what our incomes are. But this idea of the people, the neighbors, and the community kept coming up. So the deeper we dug into this as a committee, the more it became clear that when we look at who is in Cottage Grove today, the community has grown so much over the last 20 to 30 years that we have residents that have been here for 2 years, for 4 years, for 10 years, for 20 years, for 30 years or more, some who were born here. That's a very small number of people when we look at it overall. That what we're seeing in this survey and what we're seeing when we're talking to people is that Cottage Grove excels at the heart of the identity that I think people are articulating, is that it excels at taking people from other communities, bringing them into the fold, and creating a family of neighbors, of residents, of people who have come to the area. So the Cottage Grove brand, in a nutshell, is what we've said is that for the past 100 and some years, Cottage Grove has successfully welcomed people into the Wisconsin's. We're not calling it the Madison region. We want to be, you know, sensitive to the fact that this is not a suburb of Madison, but into Wisconsin's capital region, and formed a community from people from other places and integrated them successfully into people who have lived here for a long time. So that's what we've identified as the Cottage Grove brand, and the story that you shared today, Paul, I think really articulates that. And we've heard through this process a number of stories where people have come from other places and really felt at home here and made some connections that I don't know that they would have made in other communities in the region. So that's the core of the brand identity for Cottage Grove. What we revolve around that is the idea that the community has a number of amenities that are unique to it. The Glacial Drumlin Trail, the beautiful landscape, the lush greenness that you see when you drive through Cottage Grove in the summertime. In the winter, where Wisconsin, we're pretty uniformly snow covered in good years, at least. The big wide open sky, which is different from what you see in other parts of the capital region here. It's just a slightly different landscape. It's the start of the driftless zone, although we don't necessarily identify ourselves as the driftless area or the driftless region, but it is the start of that particular landscape. So we've identified it at community, the landscape in particular, and then third, the convenience to other areas within the state. Milwaukee, the capital region, the education system, which seems to be attracting people who have higher than average educations, who earn higher than typical incomes even for the capital region, and who have, for a certain extent, we can see there's an element of the population that is here for 4 or 5 years and has a a professional segment of their career here and then moves on to another community as they're transferred or promoted to another part of the country. So that's the heart of the brand. Some of the unique things about Cottage Grove that we really have emphasized in terms of attracting stakeholders is the higher than average incomes in the area, the higher than average education, the proximity to a strongly skilled workforce, which isn't so much an appeal to residents, but an appeal to businesses and other investment-style stakeholders that might be choosing to locate a business here. Transportation in terms of having a rail spur and in terms of having very good access to the highway system. So with that, I don't want to just talk at you about your community because you know all this stuff already. What feedback do you have for me when you look at the brand book? Or what things should we incorporate into this that maybe we're not missing, or things you'd like to see emphasized more strongly?
Well, I wasn't here a year ago when this whole thing started, so how many surveys did you send out initially?
We did a random sample survey of Cottage Grove residents using a combination of the 53527 zip code, which is the core, and when you look at the demographics in the top line, the way the U.S. Census is structured, we can only access that information from the most recent community survey. But for the purpose of address collection, the UW River Falls Survey Center was able to include everybody in the sample that was in that zip code plus the township and the village, or the town and the village. So it was a comprehensive list. We initially sent out 800 questionnaires, and I have to remember how many we got back.
447.
Thank you.
The last page.
Thank you, yes. Yeah, and they came back relatively quickly. So we, random sample surveys give us the most accurate, statistically speaking, reflection of a community. Now that said, because it was a mail survey, and we have an issue with all mail surveys right now across the nation in every context of skewing a little bit older. So we weight responses for the purposes of analysis, so that if you're a younger respondent, a 25-year-old respondent, you maybe count for 1.1 or 1.2 responses. So we used weighted respondents in order to accomplish that. Yeah.
So with the brand information and your background and everything, really the big push from my perspective, and I think a number of other board members, is really around economic development.
Mm-hmm.
We've got a lot of houses in the community. Some people have said it's a bedroom community, which for a lot of folks, including myself, I drive to Madison every day to go to work. We are seeing some development out with the Summit Credit Union that's impressive from the interstate perspective. We have a lot of local businesses, but with a brand around people, how do you change that or convert that into economic development?
Yeah, so one of the key elements of economic development that we're dealing with across the state right now is talent attraction. Companies are moving to communities that have talent and have available workers. In this economy, and let's hope this economy remains strong, we cannot manufacture available workers. We're just going to be too tight for the foreseeable future, knock on wood, to manufacture workers. So what we're really hoping that communities can do is attract good people. And in this case, it's talented folks with education, in either a university education or a technical education. I know oftentimes when we say education, we're thinking in our minds people with college degrees, and you have far more than the typical population of college and graduate degrees here, but also strong technical degrees, people with technical degrees and technical skills. So the emphasis on people and the emphasis on integrating new residents into the community is one of the things that indirectly will allow the community to grow, because the talent will be based here as opposed to the other side of Madison or towards the Delson, where along that 90-94 corridors where we're seeing the development. So that's one of the strategies. Now that's an indirect strategy. It doesn't directly bring a company here. So that's one thing for it. We've talked about, Paul and I have talked about what do next steps look like, and it might be doing some things like creating newcomers clubs to integrate people into the community even more quickly, having a website, it's an easy to maintain Wix website that's geared for new residents or potential residents. Our Chamber of Commerce websites, our municipal websites, out of necessity, have a lot of information to wade through because they serve us as community members rather than outsiders who are looking at moving here. So some of those things can, as secondary efforts, help reinforce that idea that Cottage Grove is a great place to live and a great place to come to. I don't know if you all have seen the report. It just was released a few weeks ago by the Applied Population Lab at UW-Madison that's also part of UW Extension. They did a pretty comprehensive study of small communities across the state that are growing in millennial numbers which is not the norm right now. Millennials, for the most part, are located in urban centers, but we have places, Brooklyn, Wisconsin is probably the closest one to here, that have seen an increase in their millennial population. They've come down to two things. They're communities that invest in themselves and have active civic lives is one thing, but the larger issue, the thing that's attracting millennials most, is a school district that has received consistent care and feeding over the years, and you have that here. So I think the combination of those things will be good for economic development. And whatever you're doing in attracting businesses, keep doing it because it's working. The fourth thing, and I feel like I don't want to lecture, the fourth thing, and this is not in the top line, it wasn't essentially captured very accurately in the brand book. You have a higher than typical population for Wisconsin of residents that were born outside the United States, and then a much higher than typical population of residents that were born outside of Wisconsin. And some of the work we've done on necessary elements for entrepreneurial communities is involved that churn. The more residents you have that come from outside of your state to a community and outside of the country, those populations start businesses at higher rates. I think you're well positioned. You've done a great job already. This is really, the cake is great. This is like icing the cake. Yeah.
Well, now, as you said, we need to position that with working with the chamber and others in both in town, et cetera, to really hone in on that, on the brand and utilizing it to our advantage.
And that's our hope from the chamber perspective, is that we can kind of get on all the same page and start bringing these things out around the state of Wisconsin to whatever economic fairs are going on, career attraction, those types of things. You know, the hard thing was when we were studying this, and I don't remember all 4 brand pillars, but we talked a lot about different brand pillars. And, you know, one was an economic brand. So Verona's really epic, right? That's kind of their brand. Or you've got the university, and education is a brand. And we looked at each of those pillars, and we really didn't fit in any of those. So quality of life, even looking at McFarland or Waunakee or some of the cities around Dane County, outside of Madison, that we kind of compete with, what do we have that stands apart from them? And really, quality of life was by far and away the thing that stood out. So I think, you know, as we work more together, how we craft these marketing pieces, and again, I really feel and believe that having, for lack of a better term, a cheerleader out around the state of Wisconsin talking about Cottage Grove, getting excited, you know, showing what we have to offer, showing the people, I think that will make a huge difference for us too. When you can start putting faces to a community too, just that warm, welcome, inviting feeling, you can't help but get excited, I think. But.
Yeah. And you know, and for people that are looking at locating businesses, Neenah, Wisconsin years ago when Kimberly Clark was just gearing up after World War II, and still today faces this problem, Neenah, Appleton, Menasha, of when they have people that come into the community from other parts of the state, the chief barrier they know for them remaining in the community, the thing that is likely to make them leave quickly is if this one spouse is transferred there and the other spouse and family members do not feel welcomed and at home. You seem to have solved that problem in Cottage Grove or addressed it in a better way than we see in other states. And that, at least the evidence that we have from the survey, in which your residents, all of your residents feel integrated. But the residents who have been here for 3 years or less, at that 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, and 5 year mark, spend a lot of time with their neighbors. They go to festivals, they go to the park. That's indicating, to me at least, and probably to you all as well, that you're integrating these new residents very successfully into the community. So you can talk about that on a statewide basis when people are thinking of locating to somewhere in the capital region. Cottage Grove is going to be at top of mind because they're going to feel more confident that they're going to successfully be able to move to the Madison region if they move to this community. Because that's our position.
Yeah, and Jen, one more thing too, on as you're looking at business development, one of the things that we're working on at the chamber level is to help particularly our business to consumer businesses understand the fact that most of our residents are leaving Cottage Grove during the day. So how do they get creative as a business? Maybe they extend their hours into the evening. Maybe they extend weekend hours. How do we, capture those folks when they're here in the village? And how do we reach the folks that are coming from outside the village to Johnson Health Tech, to Summit Credit Union, to utilize our Cottage Grove businesses when they're working here during the day? So that's an ongoing discussion that we're having and hope to have with, Mike being on the Economic Development Committee as well. So it's kind of this twofold process that I see happening right now.
You've done very well as a community when I read these reviews and I read these survey results from other communities across Wisconsin. You should pat yourselves on the back. This is a great way for your community residents to be thinking about you.
Okay. Any other questions or?
I just have one.
Yeah.
So I wasn't here a year ago either. Is the end state of this, are we going to have like a new logo or like a theme or a motto? Or, because we've gone through a number of those over the 20 years I've lived here.
We could have a new logo. We've got a couple that we mocked up, but that's an expensive process to switch over letterhead and signage and whatnot. So that could be an end state. That would be a second set of decisions. We could have a new motto as well. I would recommend that if we decide to do those things, that we create a possible consideration set and then open it up to the public and have them vote and participate so that we have really strong buy-in from the community. And that's the exciting part that people like about brands, right?
We will be leaving shortly after this presentation to go to the township, present the same information. And my sincere hope, and Kristen did provide some potential, mock-ups of a joint logo between the town and the village, or a fresh logo, and that's hopefully a conversation that, as the two joint boards, you guys can maybe have together, and the chamber would certainly love to be a part of it. But the people who live in Cottage Grove for the most part, don't see themselves as village or town.
No.
And so I'm hoping that an end result of this down the road is going to be a little bit more co-branding and marketing as well. But it has been a consideration. We know that process may take a little bit longer, but we want to get this brand book done, get the town's feedback, put out a final draft, and then allow for all of you to start using it in whatever capacity you see fit. So those are our next steps.
Do we have a motto now?
I don't know that we do. Do we have a motto?
We talked about close knit, close by. There's a lot of ways that we can frame it.
Lee, do you have a motto?
Right. Not that I'm going to say now. Because keep it for the.
You want to trade it?
The one that's on business cards is location has its advantages.
Yeah. Yeah. Which on the village cards is good. I think knowing what we know now. It's not just about location, it's also the people. And so if there's a way to kind of tie that in, I think those two things together. And we did talk quite a bit about location and the fact that we have the two major interstates. that was a long discussion as well. Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
You can steal the good neighbor, say we're the friendly neighbor.
And please feel free to send myself or Kristen the feedback as well. We hope to wrap this draft up in the next couple weeks. So,
anything you have to add is welcome.
As far as the economic development is another thing that businesses look for, that a community is able to support all of the workers that they would have, such as we have ability to build out and get more residents in here to help support businesses. Is that part of what?
Yeah, one of the things that I've recommended is that when we go to print the brand book, should the brand book be printed and not live virtually, rather than having it one static item, that you put supplements in the back of it. So items that can be added would be available land space, shovel-ready acres, where the fiber is laid in town, all of those things that when a business really looks to locate here, they're already accessing that information from somewhere that's all been gathered, and just putting them in the back as a supplement is a way to kind of build that out a little bit.
Great.
Yeah. Any other questions? Thank you guys.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, item Item 7, unfinished business, discuss and consider an award to a contractor for West Lawn 3rd Edition wetland restoration, or some of us know it as Conservancy Court. Mike? I have to give Mike a plug because I've been after him for a while for the final approval that was needed, and we finally got that last week, I think.
Permit came through, and you know, we weren't getting a permit from the Corps for quite a while, so we said, well, we'll get ahead of it and advertise this for bidding. Bids opened last week, and the permit came in at the same time as the bid opening, the same day. So it puts us in a position, should you approve awarding it to Nelson Excavating and Son at $79,480. The amount in the budget was $85,000, I believe, and you know, $79,000, and we had about $5,000 in engineering and permitting. So we'll come in to the budget amount through construction. I also included, well, we put into the packets the bid tab that came through from the contractor, and we reviewed all their bid items. It's a good bid, responsible bid, fair amount for every bid item down the list. We did receive one bid, and sometimes people are concerned about that, but given, you know, it was within the estimate that we started some 3 years ago, talking to different contractors and, you know, and making our own estimates. It came in, you know, within budget. And they, you know, I'd be concerned about trying to rebid it because we may not have any bidder at that point. But we have one bidder ready to go. The project's to be completed by September 1st. Not that it should be open under construction at that amount of time, but we wanted to allow enough time for dry weather to happen, and we're not having that right now. So, you know, we foresee, we've had historical dries in July or August, so that's when we anticipate they'll be ready to go on the wetland portion of it. This project also has two helping out situations we had on a Conservancy Court at two properties at each corner. One that's sending their discharge into the street through the curb and gutter, and also has an open tile coming off their front eave that goes into a pipe, and then it spills out in front of their curb stop, and we think that's recharging their own problem back to their foundation. So the contractor would mobilize to do some of those smaller items, even if the wetland's wet, so they could kind of take care of those ahead of time. But once we have dry weather, they can mobilize and, you know, do more good than harm type of thing. That's when we want to see this. And we also added a little bit in the past year. Basically, we had a good public participation from the neighborhood at a meeting, and that tuned us into not just kind of scraping out through the middle, but also creating a lobe that went to the west and picked up the rear yards that appear to be taking on more water, so that the wetland would get lower than those rear yards. So we added to the amount and came in with a good bid.
Good.
So.
Mike, with all of the discussion and review by neighbors or concern by the neighbors, have we communicated to them, well, okay, here's the project, and this should take care of your issues?
We communicated that this will certainly help the issues as far as surface water buildup in their yards. A few of the homes that were at the corners of Conservancy Court, the scrape itself doesn't necessarily help them, but we have specific projects, smaller projects to help them with their drain tile situation or their sump pump discharge issue there. But this, you know, as time went on, I mean, this started with one neighbor in the end of the cul-de-sac talking about water sitting in the very back of their backyard close to the wetland, and it kind of grew over time. And you know, and the latest was, you know, that this is blocking water getting out of the Helgeland property. So, you know, it's helping all those surface water issues and alleviating, you know, water standing there. You know, it's something that we'll watch over time. You know, we can say this is going to work for 10 years or more because there's no active farming going on due north of it, and the county helped with the property between Gaston Road and I-94 by putting a greenway in so that we don't have so much, open ag runoff in that area. So, yeah, it was talked about what it can do and what it would be limited to doing at those open meetings. And we really haven't changed the project other than to expand the amount of scraping.
And obviously, any development north of their Hamlin's property will have to deal with the water that might be coming off of that development.
Right.
As with any
Some
development.
within the development. I understand they had other situations with wetlands and that they have to deal with.
Right. Any other questions, comments, concerns? I think we've heard, most of us heard of this at least once, maybe multiple times. And definitely concerns for those residents impacted. We have a motion to approve the bid.
I'll make a motion to approve the bid.
Okay, there's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and second to approve the bid for the scrape, and we're doing some other work, obviously. Is there any further discussion? Having heard none, then all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Anybody abstain? Motion carries. Thanks, Mike.
Thank you.
Now you won't have me about it anymore. We're going to move up, if no one opposes this, the item 9-3, Community Development Authority, since, where is it? Oh, he's here. Oh, yeah, Greg's here. Being cognizant that Greg's here, and we'll get that one moved through. This is in, again, discussions around the TID districts 8, 9, and 10, and I'll turn it over to Greg.
Thank you. Would anyone like a hard copy of any of the project plans?
Sorry, haul goes all the way here, Greg. Good for your mustache.
Well, good evening. I'll take these in order. So what you have before you are the 3 project plans for each of these 3 TIP district creations, and then resolutions for your consideration as well. So first I'll direct you to the TID number 8 project plan. And we'll start by just kind of orienting you to the boundaries of the proposed district. There's a map after page 8 of the project plan. The page numbers are in the lower center of the page of each project plan. And you'll see the map of the proposed district for TID 8. This district is a mixed-use district, which by law means that at least 50% of the area within the district is suitable for a combination of commercial, industrial, or residential development. You'll see on the proposed land uses on this map, the uses will be primarily commercial in nature, and then there's also some existing newly platted residential development that's being included in this district as well. The residential development will be used to kind of capture some initial increment value within the TIP district that'll be used to generate some tax increment to support some of the broader objectives and initiatives of the district, of which the balance is really trying to facilitate some additional commercial development along Cottage Grove Road within the boundaries of the district. So the primary uses here are really twofold, commercial and residential. In terms of the project costs that have been identified in the plan, there's a map of the proposed improvements, which can be found after page 15. The infrastructure improvements that have been identified consist of some sewer interceptor improvements, and then some improvements to County Trunk BB or Bus Road, and basically some street improvements associated with those projects. So you'll see they're all depicted on the map in terms of where they are located. Some of these projects are located within a half-mile radius of the proposed TID boundary. There's a provision in the TID statutes that allows you to undertake projects if they fall within a half-mile radius and if they are identified in the project plan. So a listing of the estimated costs of those projects can be found on page 17. So you'll see the sewer improvements, the road improvements have been identified. There's an allowance for administrative costs, which can either be staff time or just other professional services or studies related to the TIF district. And then finally, we've included an allowance for development incentives. The reason we included an allowance for development incentives is if those are not specified in a project plan, you cannot offer a development incentive. Just by including it in the plan, you are not committing to offering any kind of a development incentive, but it allows you to do that at some point if you so choose without having to amend the plan. All the project costs that are identified are really, this is kind of a planning document and identifies which projects are TID eligible. By considering creating the district or including these particular projects, you're not authorizing any of these projects to actually occur. All of that will require separate authorization by the village board at a later date. But by identifying them in the plan, if tax increment is generated and sufficient to pay for these projects, they can be legally financed and paid for through the TIF district. We prepared some initial development assumptions and working with staff that would initially support about $3.1 million of project costs, and those are summarized on page 21. So what this is an estimate of the new taxable value that would be generated within the TIF district. So when a TIF district is created, all the taxing jurisdictions continue to collect their share of taxes on the value that's there at the time the district was created, which in this case is as of January 1st of 2018. Then any new value or appreciation of existing value, all the taxes that are generated from that new value are retained by the TIF district to pay for the TIF eligible expenses. So we've projected some value from residential development. This is based on 17 homes with a value of about $325,000 per home. The commercial development within the TIF district is comprised of about 12 lots. To be conservative, we've only projected development on half of those lots, so half of it with a value of approximately $1 million per lot. So we're deliberately trying to be conservative in terms of projecting the value. So that combination of residential and commercial development is estimated at $11,550,000. Over the 20-year life of a TIF district, if that value was constructed as shown here over the first 7 years of the TIF district, over the 20-year life of the TID, that would generate about $4.9 million of tax revenue. So there's a cash flow projection on page 23 that kind of summarizes the future cash flow projection of the district. It shows some phased borrowings for those road and sewer infrastructure costs as increment development is increment values generated, so shows that that can support the level of investment over the 20-year life of the TIF district. And really, as the village has done, certainly with TID 5 and TID 7, it's important to kind of manage that pace of investment with the infrastructure to tie as closely to the development actually occurring. Sometimes there's a need to get some of the infrastructure extended and put in place to allow that development to occur, which makes sense, but you want to make sure that, the development will happen reasonably soon after that infrastructure is put in place, because the sooner the development occurs is the longer that increment value has to generate within the TIF district. So if there's a bit of a lag in time, there increases the potential that, the TID would require some other financial support until the increment is generated. So as the village has done in the past, anytime you finance TIF projects, we typically come forth with a cash flow projection, kind of demonstrate whether or not it's reasonable to conclude that the TIF would support those projects. So you're really just kind of setting up the tool by creating these districts. The projects will be evaluated and financed at a later time, hopefully to match the pace of development. So in summary, TIF District 8 is really an objective to really kind of facilitate some additional commercial development along Cottage Grove Road, utilizing some of the increment value from the anticipated subdivision construction to initially generate some of that increment to help support the sewer and road costs that were identified in the plan. So I'm happy to answer any questions on TID 8. do you prefer to act on the resolutions all at once, or?
I'd suggest that we do them as you present them.
That's fine.
That's what I thought too. Greg, thank you. Again, TID 8, it really is about developing an underutilized area within the Grove, bringing services to our citizens, and also leveraging some of the residential planned development started there, and really making that part of our village utilized much more effectively, and again, bringing those services to our citizens. So that's kind of the drive. The CDA did approve this resolution. I'm not sure if we called it a resolution or just.
It was a
Yeah,
resolution.
a resolution.
Mhm.
And have spent some time working through this with Greg and staff. So definitely supported through the committee efforts there.
And this would be the second to last step in the process. There's
Yes.
still a meeting with the Joint Review Board that'll happen July 11th, and that'll be consideration of that would be when the final approval could happen. In particular, to district number 8, Aaron and I have been approached by a developer that's already looking, saw the draft project plan and is approaching the plans to approach the village following the potential approval of this with a commercial project.
Any other questions for Greg regarding this TID? Any comments? If not, does anybody want to throw out a motion?
I motion that we do approve this.
Okay. We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
And a second. To approve the resolution considering 2018-11, resolution approving the project plan establishing boundaries and TID District 8 in the village of Cottage Grove. Any further discussion?
When we also add as set forth in the packets, so
Oh,
that the
that's-
information is incorporated.
As set forth in the package. Thank you, Lee. Now, see if I remember that for the next TID.
I'll write it down.
Oh, yeah, there you go. Having heard no further discussion, all those in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Anybody abstain? Motion carries. All right, TID District number 9.
Yes, so the next one is TID District number 9, and I'll direct your attention to the map for that district. I think we'll look at the map that's after page 9, which has the TID boundaries and the land use map as well. TID 9 is technically what's called an overlay of TIF District number 6. And what that means is that some of the parcels that are within TID 9 happen to be in TID 6 presently. TID 9 will function just like any new TIF district. Any development that occurs within the boundary of that district, the increment will go to TID 9. So if any of those parcels get developed that are presently in TID 6 that will now be in TID 9, that increment will go to TID 9 and not to TID 6. So you'll see in the map after page 9 is that there's a boundary in red, which is the proposed boundary for TID 9. There's hatched shading for the parcels that are within TID 6. And then the remainder of the boundary, primarily down to the south of TID 9, is the remaining boundary of TID 6. I want to make just a kind of a comment on TID 6 in general. As some of you may be aware of it, for some of the newer village board members, TID 6 has been in place for a number of years. TID 6 really hasn't seen any significant development within that district. Several years ago, the village had constructed some infrastructure improvements which were identified in the TID 6 project plan, and that debt was initially assigned to TID 6, but there hasn't been increment that's been sufficient to cover that debt service. We worked with the village on kind of a comprehensive financial plan a couple of years ago, and one of the key objectives of that plan was to start incorporating the TID 6 debt service into the village's overall levy for debt service. So that's been built into the budget for the past several years. So the village was, having a stable revenue source to pay that debt service. By kind of overlaying a lot of the undeveloped parcels that are presently in TID 6, it's probably going to kind of make TID 6 financially moot at this point going forward. I mean, TID 6 was struggling anyways, but since most of this, there's only a few years, there's less than 10 years remaining on TID District 6. So even if there was development within that district, the increment collection period was going to be significantly short. So by putting that into TID 9, it kind of restarts the clock for that particular district. But you cannot reassign the debt from TID 6 to TID 9. That's not permitted under the TID statute. So the village will continue to levy the debt service for TID 6 debt as it had done in the past. But we'll likely be working with staff as you kind of go through the rest of the year. You will collect increment next year in TID 6, but it may make sense to just close that district. What that's likely going to mean from a financial standpoint is TID 6 presently owes some money to the debt service fund. The debt service fund has a fund balance that it should be sufficient enough to cover that amount that is owed. So it's not that TID 6 is going to pay it back. It's going to come out of the debt service fund to reduce the fund balance. And then there's some money owed by TID 6 to the water utility. That likely may not be repaid, so that would be just kind of be reflected on the balance sheet of the water utility. So none of that is being decided here this evening, but I kind of want to preface that that's likely something you may be acting on, sometime prior to May 15th of next year, which is kind of the date in the TID calendar to decide whether or not you want to close the TID district. So in talking to staff, and I've had conversations with the village's auditor as well, I think we all just want to understand how that's going to flow through your financial statements. But this action really kind of likely makes that closure of TID 6 a reality. So I just want to comment on that this evening. Getting back to TID 9 in terms of the project costs that have been identified, those are shown on a map after page 15. The improvements here primarily consist of some road improvements, some bike path improvements, and some well number 2 improvements. So some of the well improvements fall within that half-mile radius and will have a benefit to the TIF district to be a TID eligible expense. So those project costs are identified in terms of their estimated cost allowance. That is on page 17. So you'll see kind of those improvements kind of phased in over the first several years of the TIF district. As we did in TID 8 and in TID 9 and TID 10, we also included an allowance for development incentives, again, just so that's an eligible cost. Don't have to amend your plan later if you choose to award a development incentive through a development agreement. So we prepared some development assumptions for this district as well. Those are summarized on page 21. Kind of looking at some existing values within the village, kind of projecting some mix of commercial and multifamily development to support the project costs, at least the infrastructure, of about $1,825,000. You're looking at about $6.5 million of new taxable value being constructed within the first 5 years of the district. That would generate about $3,116,000 of tax increment. So the cash flow for that district is on page 23 of the project plan. Again, with phased financing of the infrastructure, shows a 20-year payback for that particular district as well. I'll make the same comments here that I made on TID 8, and it'll be important to manage the implementation of these projects to kind of match the pace of development to increase the likelihood that there'll be TID increment available to support those projects. So the main land use objectives for TID 9, kind of combination of commercial, possibly some multifamily housing, since a lot of the territory is presently in TID 6. By creating TID 9, kind of starts that clock over on a new 20-year period, but again, we'll have to address the existing situation with TID 6, but this will kind of provide a new opportunity to try to facilitate some development on some properties that have had some development challenges, particularly the area across the street here that's been in TID 6 for some time. So happy to answer questions on TID 9.
Any questions?
I'll make a motion to approve the resolution 2018-12 for TID 9.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second, and that is as indicated in the packet. I think it's on-
As set forth in the
As
village
set
code.
forth. You gotta have a fancy word to set forth.
Hmm?
All right. Any other further discussion? Having heard none, then, all those in favor of approving the resolution?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Anybody abstain? Motion carries. All right, now we move on to TID 10.
So TID 10, also a mixed-use district. I'll direct your attention to the map that's after page 8, which shows the boundary of the proposed district and then the anticipated land uses within the district, since this is also a mixed-use district. Really, the two uses here are industrial and kind of commercial/office uses. So you'll see those areas kind of identified. That mix can change, but there'll need to always be kind of a combination of those two uses, industrial and some commercial or office use. Really, the purpose of this district from a land use objective is really to identify some larger tracts of land. You'll see several 40-acre parcels that are identified here that really can be built out as kind of an additional business park within the village, as you're starting to see Commerce Park have utilization, and remaining development areas certainly aren't as large as the tracts of land that are available here. This is really anticipated to be a future business park and provide much larger parcels available for development to react to development trends within the area. In terms of the project costs that have been identified for this particular district and the improvements, those are shown on a map after page 14. Consist of some improvements at County Trunk N, some utility improvements, water main improvements, and then some force main improvements, and then just some other roundabout improvements and other improvements located within County Trunk Highway TT. We've identified, again, some projects that fall within the half-mile radius that will kind of help facilitate and are related to the development within the boundaries of the district itself. So the listing of the projects, the anticipated costs is found on page 16. We've identified those projects that are within the half-mile radius, included the allowance for administrative costs, and included an allowance for development incentives as well. So the initial infrastructure investment is identified at about $4.5 million. In terms of the development assumptions, those can be found on page 20. As a combination of industrial and commercial development, we looked at some comparable developments that are currently occurring primarily within TID 5. Those are at about $590,000 per acre of value. We're showing about 30 acres of developable land results in $18 million of value. That's what's needed to pay for at least the initial infrastructure costs. So we're showing, again, 30 acres of developable land in this development assumption projection, but there's 235 acres in the TID. So really what that shows is only a portion of the TID needs to be developed to support all of these costs. So we're trying to be conservative in terms of what we're projecting for value. So that $18 million in new taxable value would generate about $7,267,000 of tax increment over 20 years based on the current tax rate of the TID and some appreciation. So the cash flow projections on page 22 make the same comment I've made on the other two. Again, timing, the phasing of infrastructure investment here will be key to kind of match, the pace of development. But really, this is core infrastructure work that's really necessary to kind of facilitate those larger areas of land being available for development. I know staff commented at the CDA meetings that there's been interest in development in larger parcels that just aren't available presently.
And similar to TID 8 and TID 10, this TID we've also been approached by somebody already that has reviewed the project plan and is potentially interested.
Any questions for Greg?
This is probably one of the most important TIDs we have.
I think they're all important, Jeff, but
But you know what I
this
mean,
is
for
potentially the
development,
biggest
for-
impact.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
biggest impact,
Yep.
that's what I meant to say.
I make a motion approving the project plan for TID District number 10.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and second. Any further discussion? This is as set forth in the packet. Anything else from anyone else? Otherwise, we'll have a motion. Those in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Anybody abstain? Motion carries. Thanks, Greg.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, now we'll move back here, keep everybody on our toes, to item 8, new business.
John, if I could interrupt, the Helblins are also here
Oh.
for CSM. I don't know if you want to skip down and share that one. It's 9.5.
All right. I got a heads up on Greg. I didn't get a heads up on that. So, anybody have any issue with moving down to 9.5, Plan Commission?
Let's vote.
Okay. All right. We'll move there then. Again, this is the Plan Commission adjusting some certified survey maps for 2 pieces as outlined in the agenda. Is anybody presenting on this?
It's
Or Aaron?
pretty straightforward. Their applicants are here, but I can kind of walk through the staff report as well.
Okay.
There's an existing roughly 12-acre parcel just north of Gaston Road. They're looking to split 3.75 acres off the southern end to build a new house. The only condition we had at the Plan Commission was we requested a 66-foot wide easement along the western boundary of that southern lot. So when that CSM is done, that northern lot 2 is going to be disconnected from Gaston Road. The only right-of-way is off of King Drive, and that street's not actually completed. The applicant did mention that they'd hope to buy the whole northern parcel again. At that time, they could combine them back and remove the easement if they so choose. So we recommend approval with that condition. And these guys have anything to add?
Well, we're not crazy about the easement. We reconfigured our lot one time already from the township because they wanted access off of King Drive, so we reconfigured our lot. And now with that 66-foot easement, it really is hindering what we want to do.
Is there a better place on the lot? If we can get to the other side, does that make a difference?
No, we can't move it to the other side because the other side already has a property on it.
And that R1 residential lot, which would be to the west of where you guys want to put an easement in, the house is roughly 18 feet off of that lot line where you'd start your easement. So I guess that'd be a little close for a road that far off an existing house, and judging by your future land use map, you got Raven Way. You got a road coming straight out of there. There's an existing house there right now. And you got a road going right through there. If you would extend your road through Gaston North where you want this easement, you'd have to go through Alliance property. So I guess I'm just kind of confused on this whole easement process. And if we're never going to sell that or let that get annexed, why should we pay taxes in the township on 66 feet and have to work about what we want to put where, so it's far enough away for an easement that's never going to happen?
I mean, if you're comfortable with them saying it's not going to develop.
Because
I'm
the
sorry, I'm not
township-
following. Can you back up a little bit? I just
Do you
kind of
have
lost
a
the thread.
picture of the lot there that you can put under the, so you can show where you're talking about, please?
So this is us, and this is the existing, which is just farmland. And the easement would come right along this border, and this is a house.
And what does the town ask you to do?
The town asked us, because we wanted to extend, we wanted 5 acres originally, but that 5 acres extended past King Drive. They didn't want us blocking King Drive. So we said, okay, then we'll go this way. So then we brought our lot this way. The township and the county said that they would approve this lot, what we're asking, under the stipulation that there would be no development back here in this farm field.
I think if we make that a condition of this also, that, like the county says, that lot's not gonna be
Yeah,
developed.
no, there'll never
then
be a house on that lot,
I
ever.
think I'd be more comfortable taking the easement off.
Yeah.
Do you own lot 2 then?
Not right now.
But it would be, I assume they're wanting a deed restriction for that.
Is this the lot 2?
Yeah.
Yeah,
lot
that's
2.
owned under the
The
Hellman
LLC.
LLC.
Right now, the whole thing is under the LLC. We're just looking at purchasing the area where our original farmhouse was and putting another house there.
Well, if Elgin, which I assume you probably have some kind of in with, agrees to putting a restriction on that for no further development, then that would satisfy everyone, it sounds like.
Here.
I agree with that.
So we just get that in writing, because I assume that the town.
Sounds like they already requested that. so-
Yeah,
Yeah, they
requested
already
that, so I mean, I think that if that was in there, that would satisfy the concerns that we get.
And we'd recommend approval, eliminating the requirement for the easement and replacing it with the deed restriction, keeping that lot in.
Everybody's happy.
That works then?
That works, thank you.
All right.
Thank you. Okay.
So then is it possible that King Street would never go through there?
It may not, but I guess as long as it's staying in agriculture, they don't necessarily need.
The street.
Yeah, or King Drive.
Can you also get Aaron a copy of the deed restriction then,
Yeah.
once it's recorded? And then that way he's got it for his files and we know that happened then.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you.
All right, thank you.
Okay. So we have,
Make a motion.
yeah, I was gonna say that's item B then, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so 9-5B, is there a motion with staff recommendation removing the easement, adding on the deed restriction, and no development on this parcel 2? Is there a motion?
I will. I'll make a motion.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All right, there's a first and second. Any further discussion? Having heard none, then all those in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Anybody abstain? Motion carries. All right. Can I move back now to new business? Or do we have anybody else that's scattered about? I've got a schematic now here for Ben. All right, so then moving on to item 8, new business. Item 8A is discuss and consider operator licenses renewal for the year July 2018 through June 2019 for the attached list of individuals. Chief, any concerns?
No.
Anything brought up?
They passed.
I move to approve.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Having heard none, then all those in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Anybody abstained? Motion carries. New business item 8B, discuss and consider appointment of Kyle Broom to the Plan Commission.
I'll make a motion to appoint Kyle Brewer to the Planning Commission.
I'll second that, or you can second it. All right, motion and second that we approve Kyle to the Plan Commission. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Any abstained? Motion carries. Item 8C, discuss a quorum for July 2nd, village board meeting date.
Those are just placed on here looking ahead to the next meeting. Obviously the 4th is on Wednesday, and I think we're just making sure there aren't many agenda items, but if we have everyone available, we could meet, or you could decide to cancel it. I don't see anything that's urgent at the moment. It's up to you guys.
Is there anything really pertinent that we feel like we need to meet, or could we just delay that for 2 more weeks?
Right, we could certainly delay it. Right now, I'm not aware of anything that's urgent.
Do we need to make a motion to do that, or can we just do that?
Well, we
I
have
think it'd be good to have a motion to, to cancel the meeting.
We have the priorities meeting next week,
Right.
so.
Yeah, if there was something that popped up, we could put it on that agenda
Yeah.
too.
All right, then do we have a motion then to cancel the July 2nd village board meeting date?
The new date, what, July 16?
Yeah, the next meeting then would be July 16th.
A regular meeting on the 16th is what it turned out to be then, right?
Yeah. Okay, I'll make a motion then to cancel the July 2nd village board meeting. We'll be meeting on next week anyway, and then we'll have a meeting on July 16th. Further discussion? Having heard none, then all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anybody opposed, any abstained? All right, motion carries. Now, moving on to item 9, reports from village boards, commissions, and committees. Item 9-1, public works, properties, and committees. Who's JJ? JJ's still here.
Patient man.
Take the stand.
We had an eventful meeting. There's an update on the bike path, but that's kind of all on hold now as we wait for word on funding in the fall. We discussed the roundabouts, which will come back to this board at the next meeting, where MSA and Ellers will bring us some more information on considering using TID dollars to do some work in the roundabouts there. We discussed some more beautification decorations responsibility. That was ultimately tabled at this time. I'm sure we'll hear some more about it later. There was discussion of the drinking fountain down in Old Town. The owners there actually served, the water's served through their building. So basically, I was asked by them if they could remove it, and the committee discussed it and said absolutely, it's theirs. We can't control it from outside, which is a problem for us. So we discussed possible development of a sidewalk maintenance plan. Basically, the 50% that's the responsibility of the adjacent homeowner. As costs get more each year, we wanted to come up with some options for folks when they get really big. So basically, the committee approved development of plan. I worked with Deb and Matt, and that too will come back to the board for final approval, but we just had to kind of work out the legal bugs, but we'll offer an option for folks. And there was discussion of, well, stop signs in general, one specific case, and then ultimately that was put on hold. We're going to get a recommendation from law enforcement committee. I'm going to give the chief at some point and give him the info and the discussion we had at Public Works, and then we'll see what comes out of that committee. I think if that covered everything, John, we had kind of a packed meeting. I think that
was it.
Most of it.
Next meeting is on July 10th due to the holiday, so similar issue with the first week and the fourth being there. So,
JJ, can I ask you a question about when you were talking about the celebrations or decorations?
The decorations?
Beautifications and stuff. Would the board want to get a report for budget time that talks about if we've kind of taken on the responsibility for these flags and for the American flags and what kind of costs that entails and
well, whether they want it or not, I've already started it. So
yeah, I was
they'll
gonna say,
get it.
Yes.
I think he was given that direction
Okay.
when we approved the flags.
Mine's greater than mine. Have already thought of that then, so.
Thank you.
All right, then next committee report was from emergency government.
We met Wednesday the 6th. We had election of officers. Mike Fonger from the town is going to be chair. I will be the secretary. We discussed the money that Hydrite gave us, made an approval to buy a TV, HDMI cable, wall mount, all that not to exceed $1,000, and it leaves us about $700 in the fund to use yet. Fire department had mentioned that the I-90 accidents have been numerous in the construction. The new 55-mile-an-hour speed limit seems to have helped that a little bit, though. And future agenda items, we're going to discuss ordinances at the next meeting, equipment update, and possible fall exercise. The next meeting will not be until, we're going to skip July 4th, and we're going to do August 1st.
And Troy and I had an opportunity to meet 2 weeks ago, or?
Yeah,
2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
And talked about organization of emergency government just in general, and we're going to have a follow-up meeting. I guess that's part of the ordinance discussion for your next meeting.
Yeah.
What date is the next meeting for?
August
1st.
Okay.
August 1st is the next meeting, Lee. And they've gone through and changed all their ordinances.
Yep.
The town has given us copies of those. Did that a few months ago.
Yep.
So.
All right, thanks, Troy. So then we've covered CDA already. Item 9.4, Ad Hoc Architectural Review Committee.
Yeah, we just really had one agenda item, which was discuss the signage concept for the Godorsey building. They gave us a little picture to look at. The sign kind of a little bit out of proportion, and the feedback of some of the citizens was, yes, we understand you need signs, not just on the building, but maybe a monument sign. They were looking to kind of exceed or test what they could do. And the feedback we gave them is, we want to help you, we want to be flexible. And here's and Aaron explained what the ordinance was and said the process to exceed that, so they're well informed. I think they were just kind of looking for reassurance that we would be, they haven't purchased the building yet, of course, right? So they're looking for reassurance that they'll be able to market it, because they had heard over and over again from prospective tenants, well, a couple of things. One was the signage is not adequate for that building, and the other is that the inside of the building is not white box. It's got the dirt floor. It's just horrible lighting. So it's not finished at all. So it's very difficult to visualize. They had also mentioned something that they, for the signage, they might have up to 17 tenants, which seems pretty unlikely. But that's the other reason they wanted to be able to have more signage. So that's what we discussed. That's anything to add, Aaron?
Yeah, it was just
Sure.
a feedback session. There wasn't a final decision.
Right.
They're going to come back with a proposed location and more details about what they'd like to see next time.
Another potential compromise is one of the old Commerce Park signs that the village has that, maybe could come down and we could replace it with this sign as another location, or just another option for additional signage.
It's the one out visible from the freeway that's kind of hard to see anyway.
Yeah. Not the actual entrance to the park sign, but yeah, one of the first signs that was put out there when the development started.
It's better for the proposed owner too to have it out there because it's more visible.
Yeah.
So more to come on this.
Yes.
Yeah, it'll be nice because, I mean, the guy who's looking to buy it lives at the Oaks Golf Course, and as opposed to having ownership that's up in Wausau. So he's very much in touch with the market, and I think there's more to come on that.
Okay. All right, item 9-5 then is the Plan Commission. We've covered item B, but item A is discuss and consider approval of certified map application for Wisconsin's Bank and Trust, Rutland Financial, to modify the boundaries of the two parcels at 580 North Main Street.
Yeah, this one I think is pretty straightforward. Currently, the parcel the bank is on is split in half north to south, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense based on the new site layout. So they're just looking to split it instead east to west, so they could potentially sell what they're labeling as Lot 2 on the CSM for future developments.
Any concerns, questions? All right. I'll make a motion then to approve the adjusted certified survey map.
Second.
Okay.
Second.
We have a second. Any further discussion?
That would be with, there's one condition in the staff
Oh,
report,
sorry.
just a couple of bookkeeping items that they have to label on the plan.
And then we'll add per staff recommendations. Once you're okay with that.
Yes.
That's set forth in the packet.
That's right. Well done.
I'm gonna start getting used to that. Is motion to approve? We did that already.
Yep.
You're on top of your game.
Well, you guys made me skip all over the place.
Yeah.
I don't know. So this is already.
It's all a
approved.
test, John.
Yeah, and right now I've fallen into the pit of.
You're doing good.
It is great.
Yeah, despair. All right, then we move on to.
I think we have to vote though.
Oh, that's what I was doing. See, you guys mess me up anyway.
Deep breath, deep breath.
Motion approved.
Aye.
Aye.
Favor.
Motion opposed. Motion carries. All right.
Woohoo. You made it through.
All right, then we move on to item 10 is reports from village officers. Troy?
No report. You're doing a great job, John.
No report, you're doing a great job, John.
Thanks, Jim. Jeff?
John, you're doing all right, but I'll say that I will not be able to make the meeting next Monday, as I had mentioned
Yes.
last time. I'm on the right slate, but I sure wish I could be there, so I look forward to reading up what you guys put down.
You watch us on YouTube.
I love meetings online.
All right. And then Melissa?
I just wanted to say that the Fireman's Festival was a lot of fun despite being extremely warm. And I'm sorry I missed the pancake breakfast on Sunday morning. I was wiped out after Saturday, so I hope
There's
it all
next year.
went well.
We'll be there next year, same time, same place.
Yes.
And John,
5:30
you're
in
doing
the
well.
morning.
Thank you. Stroke of my ego, I love it. All right. John, the other John.
Yep, I did have one item that was listed and I have one other item, but the communication to those charged with governance. I read that report, I'm sure most everyone did afterwards. A couple concerning issues to me being new to the board was towards the end, Baker Tilly's report basically saying there was no new accounting practices adopted. And so I scheduled time with Matt and Deb I think left some notes with Matt. So we did spend about 30 minutes to an hour last Friday, and it basically comes on the staffing level, so I was comfortable with that. So I don't know if anyone else had comments on those documents, but I thought it was quite beneficial. Second item is we did use Village Hall today as myself. 10 citizens met with Superintendent Dan Olson and Jared, who's the budget director for the school district. We met for almost 3 hours this afternoon talking about moving forward with the Facility Advisory Committee recommendation and some of the concerns with some of the citizens out here with taking the findings of the survey and paying for what we can pay versus what we actually need and coming up with a long-term plan. So I thought it was very beneficial for the administration of the school district to hear from 10 citizen members, and they did commit to bring a recommendation to the school board to have at least one listening session. Typically, they like to have one in Monona and one in Cottage Grove, but just due to the time constraints, it's probably just going to be one. But once I do get that date, I'll be sure to pass it along.
At the school board meeting, it seemed like they were going to try to do more than just one.
Well, there was some early indications that they were going to have listening sessions after the survey results came out, but I don't know what's going on at the school board level. It's middle of June right now. They have to have their decision by the end of August. So they did commit to make a recommendation to the school board to have one. So it sounds positive.
One's better than none. Thanks, John. I have no report. Jack is enjoying himself with a little vacation in R&R. Attorney Lee Boucher.
No report.
Matt.
I had mentioned a couple of the businesses that have approached us, or developers that have approached us regarding those TIDs, and some of the feedback that we're receiving is how great it is that each TID provides completely different development opportunities. So it's going to really help the village to not just to get development, but diversify the commercial development. So, and we're seeing that with what's people that are coming forward. And in addition to the ones that I had mentioned, there's also 2 others on top of that are looking in other spots in the village. So there's seems to be people taking notice that the village is being proactive, and so a lot of good signs.
Very nice, wonderful.
And I probably stole Darren's report then too. So.
Aaron, anything to add?
No, I think I covered it.
Just say thanks, boss. All right, Chief, anything from you?
No, just a quiet weekend, law enforcement. I mean, nothing out of the unusual for Fireman's Festival. It was
a big festival front way.
Yeah, so it was uneventful for us.
Yeah.
Good. Which is good. Thanks. Yes.
Well, I saw a lot of your folks out along with the town and county, so it was nice to see.
Yeah.
I think it made everybody behave as they should. All right, then we.
John, I think we should give Deb a chance to talk because she never gets called on any other meeting. Now tonight she's the
Anything to say?
Oh, boy, that's not what we hear at the
I'm a little bitter
staff.
about it.
Well, that's all right.
We can certainly add you to the list of future meetings. I think that's the
That's
action
okay.
out of this.
You can say no report.
Put Deb on the spot. Item 11 then is communications and miscellaneous business. Approval of vouchers is the first item in there. Any questions about the vouchers from anyone?
On page 3, what's the Brooks Tractor Inc.?
Yeah.
I mean, is that something that was budgeted, I
Is
assume?
is that just one vehicle or?
That's our new payloader, well under budget. I know it's a big number, but way under what was budgeted. But that's our,
Good job.
New payloader and attachments, yep.
Good.
Did you get what you wanted for your trade-in?
Yes. Yes.
Page number 5, Drumlin Residences, return to surety. What project is that? Am I being naive there?
Nope, that's for the new
Senior apartments.
senior apartments.
Okay.
And page 8, what's NASRO? Missing what the acronym is.
Sorry, what?
What's NASRO on page 8? NASRO for Jessica.
Oh, it's a police item, chief.
What's that?
NASRO?
1-year membership.
Oh, that's School Resource Officer
Oh.
Association. It's only $40.
Well, I know. I just didn't know what NASRO meant.
Oh, yeah.
I'm saying it wrong. It's
National,
NASRO.
yeah, National Association School Resource Officers.
That makes a lot more sense.
Wonderful. Motion to approve, anybody? Or any other questions?
I'll move to approve.
All right, got a motion, is there a second?
I second.
Motion second. All those in favor, then?
Aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Anybody abstaining? Motion carries. Correspondence item B. We have League of Wisconsin Municipalities 2017 dividend.
Yay.
All right.
Yeah, so
Money
for the,
come and have us all.
there's just a little memo in the, or letter from the league in the packet, just showing that for the 11th time in 12 years that they've returned a dividend. It was a little over 16,000 that the village received, and then there's also. You want me to move down? Any questions about that at all? Where does that want to go?
Yeah.
Goes into the general fund.
That came out of the general fund and went back in, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
And then along with that is the next item.
Okay.
And JJ, if you don't mind. Sure. There was a grant program that JJ participated in, safety grant.
Yep, and actually the aforementioned payloader and attachments we were already hoping to get got us to qualify for the safety grant and get the absolute maximum amount. It's not a huge amount, but we got a grapple attachment with this, so basically the unruly huge piles of brush are a thing that's defined, or we talk about annually with our insurance folks that they don't want the guys fighting those. That's big thing where folks get hurt in municipalities. So the really big ones, we can now grab with the payloader and put in the truck.
Nice.
And the safety grant came back really fast after I applied. It was back in, I think, a day and a half, so they must really like that.
Is there any matching, JJ, is there any matching funds to the grant?
It was just kind of if you get something that improves safety, you can get up to a percentage of your premiums, right?
So where does this money go then?
Assuming back in the general fund.
Great.
All right. Thanks, JJ, that's great. All right.
Village.
Item C then is upcoming community events. I think we're all breathing a sigh of relief after the weekend for a lot of us that were involved.
Well, also just a reminder that we're asking you to come back from committees, or if you know of something that's going to be happening at one of your committees that you need, you would like staff to attend for any reason. That's kind of the idea behind this.
My wife and I got a lot of good feedback from people that were runners on Saturday morning, thanking us for being there and putting on the event every year. So
The Glacial Drumlin Garden is always looking for help to weed and water. It's on the west side of Glacial Drumlin, and there's two ladies that help keep it up over the summer, and they have a Sign Up Genius where you can sign up for a day. It's like 3 times a week, and I do it with my daughters, and it takes us half an hour, because if you're weeding 3 times a week, there's not much there. So the longest that takes is watering. So if you're interested, they're always looking for volunteers.
And I would agree with most. I've done it with my wife before, and it's not too bad. The watering does take the most. That's a pretty good drive, but we haven't had that worry for a while. We'll move on to item D then, future agenda items. Our next meeting is really the 28th, really, that's to cover priorities, but then it's the 16th, sorry, 25th. Thank you, John. So 25th, that's covered, but then we've got, the next meeting is the 16th. Anything that we need to...
There'll probably be another draft or the further discussion of the draft that's developed on the 25th could be discussed again at the next meeting after that.
And that folds right into certainly the, we'll be in budget season before.
Yeah, the financial management plan will be coming up. It's a 5-year plan, so we'll be updating that with Greg Johnson and Ellers will be in to discuss that coming up.
Right.
But that might be in August.
Another future agenda item, it might be useful to have the rugby club back in, because I think there's some stuff happening there. Talking with Greg Zietlow.
Yes, they actually may be into an upcoming plan commission for a site plan of a storage facility is what they're going to get started.
Storage facility is next. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
As part of that, though, they do have a plan that was approved. And we've told them any number of times that you still need to come in and get that, either amend the plan, change the plan in some fashion.
The agreement?
And, yeah, per the agreement that was executed between the village and the rugby club.
Okay.
And that just doesn't seem to really ever click.
Yeah, that they need to do that, you mean? Okay. Well, I can communicate through my channels that I need to come in and do that. I mean, we might, what I'm concerned about is we might have, we have the plan in 2020 to put up a shelter, if you will, or for restrooms, and they're kind of planning the same thing 100 yards away, or at least restrooms. And I asked, if you're going to do that, will that be open to the public? And they said, yeah, it would. So it's not going to be behind their fence or, so.
That's part of the agreement is they have to make it available to the public.
There you go. So, yeah, so I don't know if we need that $400,000 building, but that's a parks issue, so we'll deal with that.
But, and just, if there's ever a time that you want, kind of a summary of this, I mean, we have met with them, we have explained it, and it's not like something we're just coming up with. It's been around for quite a while.
Yeah, and they're putting the money together, so they're getting closer, I guess. Is
Right.
the gist of what I got out of it, but the conversation I had.
Yep.
I think at the last board meeting that you were going to do the building inspection ordinance revision, Lee. Is that
Oh,
coming
that's right,
up
yeah, you're right.
at the future then?
Does that have to go through the ordinance committee first then?
No.
Oh.
That was just more administrative
Oh,
than
yeah.
anything, and as I understand it, the contract's been signed and.
Okay, so then we
Yes.
let's sort that one out. So
Yep.
any other agenda items from anyone else? All right, then we will move on to item 12, closed session. The Village of Cottage Grove Village Board enter in a closed session pursuant to Wisconsin State Statute 19.85, parentheses 1, parentheses E, deliberating or negotiating the purchase of public properties while investing in public funds or conducting other specific public businesses whenever competitive or bargaining reasonings require a closed session. This closed session is to discuss the property negotiations for parcels number 70111718168 and 071117106001, former lift station on Vilas Road, and negotiate terms, potential development of TID number 5 regarding CG Silver Badger LLC. So we need to.
Well, we need a motion. and then,
Oh, yeah, we need a motion first.
Motion and second, and then.
I move to go into closed session.
Second. Okay, we have a motion and second, then we'll have a roll call.
Allen.
Aye.
Elmore.
Aye.
Lindberg. Aye. Ratcliffe.
Aye.
Russell.
Aye.
Williams.
Aye.